to record and here we are. Welcome, Wynn.
Hi, Alfred.
Yeah, here we are finally. And tell us where you are. I mean, more or less, you've got some beautiful brush back there. It looks like pines and.
Right, I'm in front of Terry's backyard. She has a beautiful backyard. I decided it was the best place to go. Keeps us grounded.
Oh, good, good. So I would like to welcome Wynn Free and Terry Brown and to our webinar here today. Hi, Terry. And I know it looks like you're at an angle, but that's just the angle of the camera. And Wynn is going to now
there we go.
Us and tell us. And I'm sorry that we have to do this. Wynn had actually set up 2 cameras, and literally minutes before we went on the air, one of them just went and got locked down. And I wonder why that happened. Could it have been some AI that went in there and did something? It was so strange. So what we do is we just move through these moments and we just adjust. And Wynn tells me that at some point in his life, he was a television camera man. So Wynn has prepared.
No, I just wanted to say that. What can I say? When I walk under streetlights, they go out.
Terry, here. Terry, you can say it here.
Yeah.
What can I say? When I walk under streetlights, they go out. Electronics and me are a little bit disconnected. I'll give you back to Wynn.
Okay, so
I used to get very frustrated with Terry because everything would break around her, and then I realized that part of my job was to being the pickup man, and you know.
Yeah, because Terry just said that when she would walk around street lights, they would go out.
I know.
And good. Well, then that's what happened to the second camera, just the minutes before airtime. So that's what happened. And so, Wynn, you had prepared a statement which I saw yesterday, which was quite something, which brought us kind of up to this time. Is that something you wanted to share? Because we're kind of freeform here. And
I'll put it in my own words, okay?
Okay.
I mean, I don't remember what I said yesterday, so I don't want to read it. But for the past 13 years, I have been in this incredible fantasy, except it's not a fantasy. Although for at least 3 years, I kept thinking, I'm making a mistake. They're making a mistake. They're negative. They're AI, okay? And, you know, I was in the middle of writing the book about David Wilcock, the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And I just wanted to be sure to say that when I met David, he was channeling and he was legitimate. And half the book is his channelings. And he was channeling from this huge source. Okay, let me just say, everyone, I'm going to say this is true, but don't believe me because you have to validate these things for yourself. I'm not starting a religion. If I was starting a religion, I'd say, believe me, but I'm not. I'm having an experience and I'm letting you look in on my experience, look in on what happened to me, still happening, and everyone listening can decide, I think Wynn is full of it, or I think this is legitimate. Because if it is legitimate, it is incredibly, incredibly important. It's important to each of us individually as evolving souls having this temporary lifetime on planet Earth, which is going in havoc, as you know, you probably have observed. It's important to the future of the Earth, and it's related to what I'm now calling the God zone. That, you know, the word God has been bandied around in our history for thousands of years. And, you know, the traditional thought that comes to mind is that there's this big guy in the sky and he's watching us, okay? And then Edgar Cayce came along, and of course, he was the most credible psychic prophet in the history, the recorded history of this realm. And he has proved something is communicating through him that can precisely diagnose people, can precisely tell people who their past lives were, and give a lot of overview things. And then David Wilcock comes along, and he's one of the more controversial people. He's 28 years old, and from my perspective, he was scared about being the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. He was scared to say it. He was scared that he couldn't match the expectations people would have. But he was coming through with these channelings, and his source was identifying itself as the Ra group. And they said they were a group soul of millions of souls that graduated this realm, that got off the wheel of reincarnation, and now existed in a higher dimension. And we're helping planets in lower dimensions, like us, people who are still stuck in reincarnation. And when I first discovered Wilcock, he didn't really say he was the reincarnation of Cayce. He said he had a resonance with Cayce. And I started studying his website up and down. I read everything on his website. I read all the channelings he was posting. And I said, if this guy's telling the truth, he has to be the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And at the time, I was writing articles, interviewing people for a metaphysical web magazine. And I told my editor I wanted to interview Wilcock. She looked at his website. She said, Wynn, he looks like a wacko. But if you want to interview him, I'm not going to promise to run it until I read it. So I interviewed him and turned it in. She called me back and she said, oh my God, you're right. He has to be Cayce. And I think you're the one that's supposed to write the book about it. And that never crossed my mind until she said that. So I convinced a very reluctant Wilcock to let me write the book. And I was writing it not so much to exalt him as being Cayce, but to bring in these extraordinary messages and wisdom that was coming in from the Ra group. And Wilcock believed it was part of the same Ra group that was coming through Carla Rucker and the Law of One. You're familiar with Carla Rucker, yes, Alfred? You're muted. Okay, I think Alfred. Some of you would be familiar with her. She had this epic session in the early 1980s where she was bringing through this. There's 5 books called Ra, the Law of One, or on Amazon. And Wilcock believed he had the same source. Well, whoever the source was, it wasn't him. Anyone who reads the channelings will know that it was far beyond his own level of wisdom. He could not have made that up. And when the book came out, he just ran away from it. He started doing ET journalism, conspiracy journalism, and did not put his channelings up. But what happened was, in the middle of writing the book, in 2002, I had a new girlfriend. By the way, I just want to, before I tell this story, I just want to show one thing here. There were many things tying Wilcock to Cayce, but one of them, and this became a repetitive thing for me, where I validated a lot of my own work because I kept meeting people that I knew in past lifetimes, and everyone looked like themselves or looked like who they were. This is like something in all my studies of metaphysical things I never discovered. No one has ever said this, that people look like who they were in their past lifetime. And the reason that occurs is because when you die, your soul carries your DNA. So when it comes into a new fetus, the soul signature programs the new fetus with the prior DNA, and almost everybody looks like their past life. And it even extends over more than one lifetime. Now, you know, your DNA changes, your appearance changes in the course of a life. So however you end your life is the one that's going to come through when you're born. But you also have your parents' energy programming your DNA, your astrology energy. It's complex, but I just wanted to show here as Wilcock and Cayce. And you meet the same people from lifetime to lifetime. So it just so happens Wilcock's father looked like Cayce's father. And Wilcock's friend looked like Cayce's wife. So he had these things posted on his website. And I said, that would be one heck of a coincidence to have so many people looking like people, okay? And then there were many, many other factors tying into Cayce. And some people wonder, and this was in the book, David let me put this in the book, you know, people think of Cayce as, you know, a gentle, loving person. And a lot of people look at David and he seems kind of brash and impatient. I certainly would say that about him from my experience with him. Well, every life is a new invention. According to Cayce's own readings, he had a prior life as John Bainbridge. And John Bainbridge was a gambler and a womanizer, and he used psychic powers for self-aggrandizement. And then in the Cayce life, Cayce consciously agreed, I would imagine, to be of service through this channeling. And he had a wife and a photographer. He had a group around him that was helping to keep him centered. And in this lifetime, David, I don't think he wanted to be known as a channel. In fact, even Cayce, when I was studying to write that book, Cayce did not like the fact that nobody was coming over to see him. They were coming over to hear him channel. And his own ego was missing the recognition. So in any case, I'm writing the book, and I did write the book. It came out in 2004. You can look it up on Amazon. It got spectacular reviews. But in the middle of writing the book, you know, David and I are fighting all the time. He's trying to sabotage the book coming out. He's afraid of being Cayce at that time. And 2 years into writing the book, this was in 2002, I had a new girlfriend. We were driving this, I told this story the last time I was on, but it's good to tell it again because it gives you the idea of how these guys on the other side work. She and I knew each other in a past lifetime. And we were driving along from LA to Portland in a pouring rainstorm. And I did a prayer protection. And at the end of the prayer, I looked up at the sunroof and I said, does anybody want to talk to me? And she answered and said, we're here. Do you have questions? And of course, I thought she was just playing along. She knows I'm writing this book about Wilcock and Cayce. But I asked some questions, and after a few minutes, she interrupted and said, that's the strangest thing that ever happened to me. So now, this was like April of 2002. For the next 6 months, whatever else we're doing, she's tapping me on the shoulder, telling me those guys want to talk to you again. And I am having the most extraordinary, amazing, far out conversations with this intelligence that says they are the council of Elohim. I look up the word Elohim, I find the name for God in the Old Testament, the name the Mormons use for God, the creators of the universe. And so this was not the Ra group, this was someone else, okay? And now, about 4 months into it, I got a call from my brother-in-law. He said my sister was going to the hospital, and I did a session with him. And I asked a question. I said, regarding my sister, she's having an operation on Tuesday, and I'd like to request any assistance for success in that operation. Now, I had no idea that they were able to assist. I mean, I'd never asked them anything like that before. And the answer was, assistance is presently being given and offered through your auspices and your helpful intervention requests. Well, the famous story is she survived the operation. And 3 weeks later, I got another call from my brother-in-law, and he said something really strange happened. Joanne had to go for tests, and the cancer was completely gone, but there was something wrong with her test because her lupus disappeared, and lupus never goes away. So then I went back and I asked them, I said, how did you guys do that? And they said, we projected a filter into her blood and took the lupus out. Well, let me see here. You know, at that time, I started asking them questions. I'm trying to figure out, let me ask them questions and see how they answer questions. See if it's, you know, if I'm talking to a source that supposedly created the universe, a lot of questions would come to mind. And I started asking them question after question, wisdom questions. And they were just rattling off answers through my girlfriend, okay? Like, here's an example. I said, many entities might be highly skeptical that such a council could be actually paying attention to these things on such an individual level with so many billions of people on this planet. Can you describe a little bit how that process of noticing takes place? And here was their answer. We see you as energy systems, as energy circuits. When there are particularly bright spots, we know to pay attention to these. The bright spots are indicative that a person in your density has tapped into the greater collective field and is thus accessing consciously the required information to further free themselves from the confines of the third density. In this manner, we are able to pay attention to those among billions who are able to make the initial sojourn into the greater developmental entities awaiting higher galactic consciousness connection. Well, that's the kind of answers they were giving me. And it was a little mind-blowing. I mean, they spoke with a lot of authority. They were very consistent. And they just did a miracle. And I'm starting to be predisposed to believe that they were who they said they were. But the woman channeling was freaking out over it. Now, at some point, I mean, I was thinking, why are they talking to me? I don't know. At the time this was happening, my life was kind of in a mess. I was selling things at street fairs. I had ambitions to be a singer-songwriter at one point, and I didn't make it happen. And, you know, I didn't feel very competent to put something out into the world. But in any case, they picked me, and I went along with it. Eventually, I found out why they picked me. And that's kind of mind-blowing in of itself. But in this first 6 months, not only was this woman channeling, but I started getting dream messages. Now, what's a dream message? I asked her in a channeling, and I said, I know I exist in other dimensions. Could you tell me how to connect with the other dimensions that I exist in? And they said, write your dreams down and you'll make a connection. So that night, I put a pad by my bed. I kept waking up and I had sentences in my head, like I was daydreaming. I wrote them down, I didn't look at them. And in the morning, when I looked at them, there were a bunch of sentences, fragments, just one at a time saying, you're supposed to be the front man. We're not doing this for entertainment. It has a serious purpose. It's the insanity of passion that makes things happen in the real world. Communication from another dimension, just like Cayce, he slept to connect with that dimension. Well, this was going on every night for a few weeks. And I went and did another channeling. And I said, who's talking to me in my dreams? And if you recall, there's two group souls. There's the Ra group, which is made up of graduates of this realm. And there is the Elohim group, which by and large never had bodies, but was able to project energy into this realm and rearrange molecules, has given, you know, incidents by my sister's lupus going away. So I asked them who was talking through me. Oh, look at that camera rock. And they said, Akhenaten. And then I said, did I know Akhenaten? And maybe I should just say, Akhenaten was this Egyptian pharaoh, I think about 1300 BC, who outlawed all the religions of Egypt, polytheism, and mostly Anunnaki religions, and said there was one God, and became very controversial. And he started his own city. All his followers went to the city. He was not very interested in doing the affairs of state. And his wife was Nefertiti. And now they're saying I was his right-hand man. And I said, what was my name? And they said, Amenhotep. So I am researching everything. I'm not taking anything for granted. But when I started researching it, I found out that Amenhotep was the name Akhenaten was born with, and he changed it to Akhenaten. And I said, man, it's unusual that Akhenaten would have a right-hand man that had his same name. And eventually I figured it out, Alfred, because the woman that was channeling had a remarkable resemblance to Akhenaten's wife. I'll show you her picture. I'm not going to say her name. She likes to be anonymous, but here we go. Of course, that's Nefertiti. So now we know the secret of how Akhenaten knew what he knew and started what he started, because his wife was channeling, and he was getting this inside information. So that was like a huge, huge bonk on the head, because I didn't really want to be Akhenaten, but apparently, and there was enough indication that I was. And the woman who was channeling, after 6 months, left. She was getting negatively attacked. She was having panic attacks, and she was scared. So she left, and about 3 weeks later, I called my old girlfriend over, and I've known Terry for 30 years. We've been on again, off again, but she has always been very unconditional, loving towards me, saved my ass more than one time in various ways. And whatever I did, she was supportive of it. And so I called Terry over. In the middle of the night, she woke me up. And here, you tell the story, Terry. Good excuse for you to be on camera, okay?
I had gone to a channeling that his girlfriend had done, and I was interested in channeling because I was studying channeling with a psychic in Los Angeles who was a police psychic, and they would call her in on different missing submarine cases, and she worked for the FBI and stuff. She was really, really accurate, and I was fascinated by the subject and took a course in channeling from her. So I went over, I asked them, I said, is there a way that I could channel you? And through Wynn's girlfriend, they said yes.
Here's a transcript of questions you asked, okay? Right there.
What is it like to be you, and what is your relationship to love and light? This is an interesting question. We do not experience physical bodies such as you would deem them on your earth plane. We are an amalgamation of light intensities in these frequencies. Our life is centered around a central purpose or focus. We experience the collective is a oneness. We build using frequency of light harmonies, sacred geometry forms such as would appear in your inner eye. We are not limited by those things which you would term earth limitations. We are not afraid of death. We do not take birth in the physical form. Our lifespan would number thousands of years of your lifespan. We pass consciously from one density to another. We perceive holographically. We do not experience fear as you experience fear. Then I ask, how does time appear to you in relationship to us? Do we seem to be much slower in thought or beingness? They said, much more localized. We exist outside of what you would call time in a linear construct. Therefore, we have an option of jumping around in and out of it as you would jump in and out of a swimming pool. So I ask, when you work with sacred geometries, do you put together forms of constructs or models or bodies or other things? They respond, we use the whole, constructs of the whole, that which the whole deems beautiful, appropriate, and necessary. We use the inner eye, the inner harmonics of that which you would deem the higher octaves of light to create. And
Okay.
so they said that I would be able to contact them and I would be able to channel them if I would maintain the proper focus. So I'll let Wynn.
Give me the headset back. Okay. Well, 4 weeks later, my friend who was channeling left. And I called Terry up. She came over. And in the middle of the night, she woke me up and said, get the tape recorder out. It's kind of funny. Here, you can just, I'm not going to move the mic, just share what happened.
I felt pressure on the right-hand side of my head, like the knock, 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 knock. And I recognized their frequencies. So I said hello to them. And they said they wanted to talk to Wynn. And I said, Wynn was sleeping, perhaps we could talk, them and me, and get acquainted with each other. They said, no, it's very important that we talk to Wynn. So I woke them up and I said, get the tape recorder out. And there it all started.
So for me, it was like, remember I said this was like a fantasy? It was like a fantasy. I mean, it was, this can't be real. The source is jumping from one woman to another and maintaining a connection with me. And I kept thinking, how do I know it's the same source? How do I know something negative is not coming in? I was aware enough of channeling to know that you can't trust it easily. I didn't trust it, even when it seemed positive. Even when they saved my sister's life, I kept thinking, maybe they're just doing that to keep me hooked in. Because I had to know that they were real. I had to know that they were positive. I had to know that this was going to benefit other people one way or another. And I didn't know how at the time. So I just kept going on asking questions with Terry. And after a while, I decided it was the same source. And at one point, there was the conversation, was Terry ever anybody famous? Because I was already thinking that maybe I was Akhenaten, and there was a statue of him, but I couldn't find a good picture. And I said, was Terry anybody famous? Oh, by the way, at one point, I met Akhenaten's mother. Her name was Queen Tai. In fact, I was at a UFO show in Phoenix, And there was a beautiful woman there. I looked at her, and I just went up to her and I said, now this is one of those things, I don't know why I said this. It was just a flash. Do you have a connection with Egypt? She looked at me and she said, I was Queen Tai. Now, 999 out of 1,000 people don't know who Queen Tai is, probably less than that. But I did. It was Akhenaten's mother, and I had been studying Akhenaten. So we left, and I looked up Queen Tai. Queen Tai is the one that looks like stone. And the woman's name is Nikki. We've maintained contact. I'm sure she was my mother in that lifetime, and so is she. So in any case, now I asked, was Terry ever anybody famous? And they told me, they said, look up St. Catherine of Siena, who I never heard of. So I Googled St. Catherine, and I found the story of this young woman who would go into the local church in Siena, Italy, and they would write down everything she said because they thought God was speaking to them through her. Here is a picture. Wait a second, there we go. Of St. Catherine channeling and some priest writing it down. And here's a series of pictures. This is what blew my mind. This is how I started believing that this was real. Terry and St. Catherine. And you can see even in the somber mode of St. Catherine, Terry has the same somber expression. And then there's Terry in a really joyous mode. And she looks like St. Catherine. And then I went and studied St. Catherine. And there's no doubt in my mind. We ended up having a guy move into our house who was actually a discarded boyfriend of girlfriend one. And while he was living there, I started to think, I wonder if I was holding the energy for St. Catherine when she was channeling. Was I a priest then? I didn't know. So I started reading all about St. Catherine. And I found that there was this guy named Raymond, who the Pope sent to Siena to make sure Catherine wasn't demonic, because, you know, she was a little bizarre. She was going into the church and channeling, and they were writing it down. So the Pope sent this guy, Raymond, to check her out. And Raymond became her confidant, and when she died, her biographer. Well, now this guy moves into our house, and he is doting over Terry. It was like he was like loved her semi-romantically. You know, they weren't romantic, but and his name was Jim, and he would cook dinner for Terry every night and say, do you need anything? Is everything okay? You know, and so when I was studying Catherine, I found the picture of Raymond, who had a remarkable resemblance to Jim. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I can. There's Jim, there's Raymond, looking very beatific. Jim was a piano player. There he is in his younger days as a piano player. You know, it's interesting. People seem to grow their hair the same way from one life to the next. You can see Jim's sideburns. You can see Raymond's sideburns. They have the same beards. It's kind of very interesting. But in any case, this was like one step, major step in having me believe this is real. There were quite a few things that happened, quite a few. I could spend probably 4 hours talking about them, but I don't want to take the time. What I want to do is I just want you who are listening to, this is not normal channeling. This is not like me saying, here's channeling, believe it. This is like, these are very expansive, beyond one's imagination, expansive intelligences. And I have like 30 conversations with the Elohim on how they actually created the realm, how they created the first DNA. I happen to have a background as a physics major, and I'm skeptical and I'm scientific. So they could answer me to the best of their ability. And here's another interesting past life. This was in 2008. And after girlfriend number one left, she was scared. She was very scared. But then she started to think there was something important. And so we ended up getting together 2 more times before it was finally over. And part of my thing of getting together with her was because I'm on this cosmic detective path and trying to figure it out. And different information would come through her than would come through Terry. And in 2008, she and I were actually driving from Los Angeles to Sedona, and we went through Las Vegas. And I did a talk in Las Vegas at IONS. And then we left Las Vegas and we went through a town called Boulder City, which is 25 miles outside of Las Vegas, and the only town in Nevada that doesn't have gambling. It's kind of a little artsy town. And she kept saying, oh, I love this town. This is the town I want to live in. So we rented a place. We rented a house. I didn't want to rent a house. So I said, let's just rent a small room somewhere or something small and make sure this works. But we rented a house. She moved all her furniture from Cape Cod. And no sooner are we settled, or she's having nonstop panic attacks. And at this point now, I'm trying to figure out how to get this into the world. Where do you start? I didn't know. I still don't know. I'm telling my stories. And one of the reasons I'm telling these stories is to make you curious, because the real meat, the real nourishment of this whole thing is the connection with these guys. But you got to start somewhere. So this grounds it. So we are in Boulder City, and I can't get anything done. My model at the time was to go out and do talks at expos, and I had done that. And I was doing well. I was the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles. I did a bunch of radio shows, including Alfred's. And, but now I am stranded in Boulder City. And if I tried to make phone calls in the house, she would scream and say, I'm picking up on all the energy. You can't talk on the phone while I'm here. So then I went to Starbucks, and I'm sitting in Starbucks, And after about a half hour, she calls me up and she says, I'm having panic attacks. I need you to come home. And I was like hitting my head on the wall because I was kind of had my hands tied about getting anything, calling people, getting on shows, doing anything. So I was on the internet and I came up with the idea of autoresponders. And an autoresponder, what is that saying? From Barbara to all panelists. Okay. Autoresponders are when you sign up for something on the internet, you sign up a form, and you start getting emails automatically. Everyone does it now. I did it in 2008. And it was easy for me to get attention to the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And David was getting more and more famous. But I was losing motivation in promoting that anymore. David and I were not talking to each other. So I put an autoresponder sign-up sheet on the page of Message a Day, or on the Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce website. And I wrote on it, sign up here for excerpts from the book and other relevant information. And people would sign up. It was easy to get people. And they would get a message every day for 6 months. That still is there. Anyone wants to sign up. I didn't give this to Alfred. Messageaday.net. Just sign up. People love this. And so the first 15 messages were excerpts from the book. And then after that, I put a message, an email, and I said, let me tell you what happened to me while I was writing the book. And we have an alarm going off in the background. All right. We'll just talk through it. And so by the time it was finished, I told the whole story. I showed pictures, and it was just like drip, 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 one bit at a time. And people started emailing me and telling me, thank God somebody's explaining all of this to us. And it was working. I was getting people paying attention to my story and to the Elohim and what they were saying. And in the middle of doing that, girlfriend number one, I'm with her. We're doing a channeling. And out of the clear blue sky, she says, the reason I chose to incarnate in Philadelphia was because I was one of the founders of the country. Now, they never do stuff like that. They never say stuff like that. Even if you ask them about a past life, they usually defer on it. But they said I was a founder of the country. And so I said, which one? And they said, you'll have to figure it out. I started going through all the founders. Who do I look like? Who do I look like? I figured it out. Here he is. Now, the interesting thing is, I have a lot of his talents. I was technical. I was building transmitters. I was artistic. I'm a musician. Ta-da. I don't know how clear that is, but
Amazing.
you can probably see it. And why did they tell me? Why of all times did they pull this out? It's because I was thinking like that guy. What he did was he made an almanac, and people were getting little wise sayings every day, astrological configurations every day. And when I was younger, I used to be an astrologer. And I'm a musician, I'm an astrologer. I was a ham radio operator. I was building transmitters in my bedroom when I was in high school. I was a poet. I was a songwriter. And if you think that this guy was Akhenaten, you look at him, Akhenaten was building a city. His goal was to build a city. And what Benjamin Franklin was building a city, building Philadelphia. And my Message a Day program was thinking exactly like the way he thought when he did Poor Richard's Almanac. And it just blew my mind. I read all about him and how he hitchhiked, which I did when I was younger all the time. He hitchhiked from Boston to Philadelphia looking for a job at a printing company. And then I started saying, well, if I was him, who do I have in my life that he had in his life? And I found his wife. So on that note, Alfred, are you falling asleep?
No, I'm following this very, very closely. And I'm also, while I'm doing that, I've written a lot of notes. I have a lot of questions. And I'm also posting the webinar into other groups, so calling people to the Village Square. So please, continuing is fascinating.
Okay. And each of them, you have questions.
Yeah.
You didn't know all this, right? I don't go out,
No,
I'm telling you
no,
stuff you didn't know.
yeah, this is fascinating. Do you want me to ask questions now, or do you want to continue and I'll ask questions further on, or, you know, what?
Let me continue
Oh,
a little
okay.
bit,
Yeah.
maybe another 15 minutes, and then I'll take
Yeah,
another
sure.
break and you can ask questions.
Yeah, sure.
Give
That's
me
good.
another.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, take all the time.
By the way, I didn't know if I was going to do this, but I'll give you an idea of what I was doing before these communications started. Okay, I was writing. The story is, I got into a rut. I was selling things at street fairs, sunglasses and swap meets, and I couldn't get out of it. And I was in San Diego. Terry used to come with me. She used to help. I was in San Diego, and it was in about 1999, and it was at the end of the day, and I had an RV, and I used to drive and sleep in my RV. And I said to myself, if I have to do this for the rest of my life, I would rather die now. And I meant it. I said, you know, I was talented, I was a writer, and all I was doing was being a merchant. And I enjoyed being a merchant, but it felt like there was something more I was supposed to do. So I started writing poems. And here's my first poem, okay, that came out of that. Looking into the eyes of the multitude, the eyes as windows to the soul, young eyes, old eyes, Spanish eyes, black eyes, Arabic eyes, Sephardic eyes, gay eyes, gang eyes, tired eyes, enthusiastic eyes, rock and roll eyes, jazz eyes, in love eyes, lonely eyes, angry eyes, happy eyes, bedroom eyes, kitchen eyes, hurt eyes, silly eyes, dense eyes, wise eyes, friendly eyes, impoverished eyes. The eyes have it, always telling a story about the being looking through them. 100,000 eyes, 100,000 stories, all connected to one energy. Step down into the physical world via the karmic path of the being, the eyes of the multitude, the eyes of God looking back at me. P.S. Want to buy a pair of sunglasses. That was my first poem. And then I was writing poems. I was going to be a poet. I was going to just walk around on the street and sell poems. I was so intent on reaching people. And I started putting my poems out on poetry blogs. And then I started sending them to magazines. and I sent them to this one metaphysical magazine, and they said, we don't use poems, but would you like to write on assignment? And I said, yes. And so I was interviewing people like Greg Braden, Ram Dass, and others, and they were paying me. They were paying me $150 an interview. And that is when I discovered David Wilcock. And that's the editor that said, I think you're the guy that's supposed to write the book about it. Now, if I didn't make that decision to start writing poems and to start sending poems out, I would have never written the book. I would have never met girlfriend one, and I would be, God knows where right now, probably dead, because I didn't have any reason to be alive. So I wanted to share the aspects of these two group souls. And the Elohim can do something extraordinary. If you just imagine, I better explain this because people that are listening may not understand. How I've learned the universe operates is that there are all these dimensions. The Elohim existed before there was a universe, before there was time. And they were energy units of awareness that the way they describe it, originally there was one awareness. It was not God, it was awareness. It knew it existed. And somehow that existed came from nothingness. And now that original awareness was able to divide itself into separate energy units that could all have their own independent free will, but knew they were connected. They knew they were brothers. They knew they were offshoots of this original first awareness. So those energy units, those original energy units, were the Elohim. And there then became millions of them. And here they are in no space, no time, a little bit of time, okay? You need time to have awareness. In other words, to be aware, there has to be a past and a future. Otherwise, there's nothing to be aware of. So they had the idea of creating persistence. And they found, they call this spinningness. Now, I try to intuitively grasp this. And there's probably someone out there who would understand this better than me. But they could spin energy in some kind of frequency. And they could do it as a team, a bunch of them together, have all these frequencies come together, and the frequencies had to be very precisely done, and it would create harmonics and nodes where they came together. And that would be a point of physicality first establishing itself. And they did this over and over again, and they were setting up a template for the universe. And now there was a level of existence, of consciousness, of awareness. And that level would then create the level underneath it. The Elohim might give guidance, but everything had free will. So the universe was created, giving everything free will, so it would create itself, kind of like a biosphere. And it would keep creating down, 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 down. And it got denser and denser. At the higher levels, everybody knew They were part of each other. They knew they were part of the one infinite creator. And then as it got down to this level here, third density, everything got very stuck. And people lost the feeling, the experience of being part of each other. They had to really search for it. So they got stuck in this realm, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, trying to master this realm, trying to have more possessions, having more control over other people. And the realm got corrupted. And beings started trying to manipulate the realm, control the realm. And today, of course, we know them as the Bilderbergs and the Rockefellers and the Greys and whoever else, right? So it like got out of hand. Now the Elohim, because they created the template for this realm, had the keys to move into it energetically, to rearrange molecules, to do miracles. And because they honor free will, somebody has to ask. If nobody asks, they're not going to do it. And this asking, this is why sometimes the Elohim were thought of as God, okay? Because, well, if we have to ask, then that becomes prayer. And if the Elohim can answer, that becomes God, right? So, but they are not God. In fact, let me just see here. I printed out these little excerpts, see if I can find this here, where I asked them, and they never talk down to me. They're always candid, they're always transparent, and reading their sessions taps you into their energy. It's embedded in their words. And as I started to learn that, okay, and it was like, how do I get this out? So I just started putting things out for free because it was too wild. It was too wild. The one thing that happened was I was on George Norrie. And I got on George Norrie because I called up their producer. And for some reason, she answered the phone and started talking to me. I was talking to her a little bit like I'm talking now. And she was really taken. She said, "What are you doing tonight?" And she put me on for an hour. And I went over. And then she kept putting me on. Like, here's like a typical little, I should have organized these better so I could find the right one. But I asked them if they like to be worshipped, okay? And they said no. They said, "We're like your big brothers. We can help you. We can blend energies with you. You can feel us. We can add to your intentions. We can cause healings to occur, okay? But we are not better than you. Many of you came into the realm, your realm, to be of service down there. And that when you connect with us, you can really increase your abilities in this realm to be of service." The way they would describe it would be, intention is the thing a human has that thrusts their energy into higher dimensions, potentially. In other words, you know, we've all seen pictures of a little old lady who lifts the car off of her son. It's an example of when your intentions are sufficiently strong, you can move heaven and earth. Well, the Elohim say that when somebody is working with intentions for the highest good of all concerned, that they can add their energy to that person's intention and increase the power of their intention. And they would be describing like riding a bicycle, where they're the chain in the rear wheel, which amplifies the motion of the legs. So when you're riding a bicycle, you can go much faster than just with your feet. So they are like the wheels and the rear wheel and the chain, amplifying your intentions. And we have seen that many, many times. And in fact, this is such a strong benefit of the connection with the Elohim that a year ago, I started something, I called it Whole Planet Healing, where we read little excerpts of some of my sessions with them and then create a visualization through our planet for both personal and planetary healing. And we've had amazing things happen as a result of that, okay? And this is like not something to believe in. This is something that if you start paying attention to my work, which most of it is free, okay? It's free. I got like an archive site of 1,500 of my conference calls where we've talked to the Elohim, where people who have been following us have asked questions to the Elohim. And we answer them live through Terry. Some of you who are listening notice a lot of energy in the space while I'm talking. I have learned the Elohim pays attention to me, and when I'm talking, they're looking at who's out there, and they can be with you right now. And if you look for them, take a moment and shut your eyes. And imagine there's this energy coming in to your crown chakra. And move it down through your body into your heart, into your solar plexus. Now, many people do this kind of visualization, but we have a verbal connection with the source on the other side, who is actually projecting this energy. Are there other beings on the other side doing this? I don't know. I know they will work with people that don't have verbal connections, but that have high intent. That's why you can have prayer, meditation groups, all kinds of things. They look for people of high intent whose intentions have caused their energy to go through the veil, and then they support them. But every night we are doing this live. We're not channeling, we're reading excerpts, okay? And they're on the line. And many people can feel them. Many people can feel their vibrations, okay? Let's see. It's like, at one point, we were doing readings for people, and then I stopped because Terry couldn't handle it. She would do a reading, and she was processing the person for a whole day, and she was out of commission. But when we were doing readings, I asked them this question, It seems like when we start a process and ask a question on somebody else's behalf, it seems like there's an energetic shift that occurs between the Elohim, that starts between the Elohim and that person. If the person doesn't block it, and in a subtle way, their inner self starts to get more open and they become more aware. Is this accurate? You are correct, because this is the Elohim. You are correct, because just by the very nature of asking the questions in the interaction between the Elohim and the individual, because there is an exchange and we access that individual's memory and that individual's conflicts of vibrations and the interchange, at that time, you ask the question about the person, the attention goes to that person. You know, basically they're saying if I ask a question about somebody, they are moving into the person's energy field to be able to give an answer. So then I said, does it stay there on an ongoing basis after the question is asked? And they said, it's put there as the beginning of a track, and it's made a road so the access can be gained at any time, and the energy can flow along the path that is opened up at the time you ask the question, and the answer is accessed. So essentially what they're saying is, when I ask about somebody, then they flow energy to that person. And when they pull back, there's a trail that the person can follow up. Aside from the wisdom of the answer of the question, the person can follow it up and hold a higher consciousness in this realm. And that is happening to the people that are coming to whole planet healing. They are experiencing a whole transformation in their life, many of them, because they're holding an energy above 3D. You know, most of our hang-ups and stuff are in 3D, and we tend to just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Most of artificial intelligence is in 3D. Most of the grays and the aliens are in 3D. Some are in 4D, and the lower aspects of 4D have negative in it. But nonetheless, when you can open up your consciousness to accessing higher dimensions, higher timelines, higher rules, you move out of 3D. And one of the indicators of that, and some of you might notice this, that of course I'm working with these sources, because they are present and they're helping lift the energy. It happens all the time that when I give a talk, when I show up somewhere, there's this experience of time going by very quickly. And in fact, people don't want me to stop. I've done 8-hour workshops, and I went on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And when I'm finished, they want me to go on. Well, I can understand it, because I can feel the time shift too. When I do these things, it's not like I'm always walking around in a time shift. But when I do things of service, we are creating a group energy. We are weaving our energies together. And when we do that, we shift time. You know, there's a very interesting session. Here we go. This is very short. This was in February 4th, 2013. And they said something. All I did was, I am going to turn it over to them to say hello. That's what I said. And this came through Terry. And they don't always, you know, say things this profound. I mean, this was just blew my mind that they actually said this, okay? We greet you in the love light of the one infinite creator. We welcome the time that you are approaching, wherein you may open your house, your body, your chakras, to be available to the libraries that are henceforth becoming available to you as the energies increase and you move into the area of radiant energy, moving through your chakras and allowing it to open, wherein you may then connect with the houses of the stars. Terry has no vocabulary in this area. The houses of the horoscopes, wherein you are able to connect to the configuration where you first entered and were born, and took a snapshot of the energy and oriented and grounded to that energy. Now other energies, as your chakras are opening, are coming into play. Now let me just go back. They were obviously talking about astrology there. And what happens with astrology is there is a flow of energy that starts out from the center of the universe, starts out from the one infinite creator, Elohim realm, and then everything in the universe is alive and has a vibration. So this energy is moving through all the vibrations of the universe, through the galaxies, past the planets, and into your body when it's born. And guess what it does? It programs your DNA with the energies of the universe. So now you have a snapshot of the universe in your DNA, which is called your astrology chart. And you're going to create certain you're going to have certain characteristics based on the astrology. And but you can go beyond that because it's all holograms. Astrology is here. Here we go. Astrology is here. We're here. The Elohim is here. It's all flowing down through all these levels. And by them coming into the space, they describe it. It's like spraying WD-40 into the matrix. In other words, things, they call it locked geometries, that we have locked geometries in this realm, and that we keep repeating the same patterns over and over and over again. And they have the ability to loosen up the locked geometries to make things shift, to make enemies like each other. Of course, there has to be free will. People have to ask for it. If people want to have enemies, if people want to create divisiveness, they can't do anything. And they say that in this period of time we're in, it's important to create outside of the negative in your own little creation, because the negative does its thing. It's not going to change. Probably won't. It could, but it probably won't. They're pretty committed to the reason negative is negative is because on some level they don't believe anyone's going to give them love free willingly. They think they have to manipulate to get energy from people, and that the manipulations they do to get energy have become horrible, okay? But if they don't do that, they feel empty inside and they're addicted to it. That's why they're negative. The difference between the Ra group calls it service to self and service to others. The difference between the two is that service to others honors free will. So there has to be a willing givingness between people. We all love energy. We all love energy exchange. And if there's a willingness and free will, then energy exchanges last for eternity. We build friends, we build relationships that don't stop. But when relationships are not based on free will, they can't sustain the energy. The energy runs down. It's why a guy who is seducing women, telling them he loves them, telling them whatever he can to get them into bed, can get a few days of good romance, and then the energy dies, because then he has to, get angry and control the person, or they leave and he has to start over again, okay? Free will is the key element that positively disposed beings in the universe extend, free will. And control is what negative beings extend. But we can't judge the negative. They have put them, they've got their backs up against the wall because they've done it for so many lifetimes. They don't know any other way. So now I was reading this thing here, okay? Where they're talking about you may become more multidimensional, more psychic, more grounded, not only to the earth, but to your family of stars within which you are living at this time. You have spoken of the keepers of time. We are the keepers of time. We have control over time in movement to speed up time, to slow down time. Once one gets into the physical universe, time tends to be slow in that it is precipitated by matter and manifestations of matter, which are moving at a very slow rate. A flow of energies are more crystallized and contained within the third density. But as you move into the higher density, and you as a race have more access to other libraries coming in with energy, and the opening of your chakras to be accepting energies from your other houses and the star system surrounding you, as you are a part of it, you may interplay more and experience a lifting and an ascension in frequency and in mind and body and spirit, and flow with it, and do not get stuck in the undertow. The undercurrent, as some of your earth at this time is experiencing, the undertow. So keep in mind, as being the creators of the universe, they weren't just creating physicality, they were creating time. And the various dimensions are actually different timelines. Like Earth moves at this speed, let's see, and then just above the Earth it moves at this speed, and then we go faster, it's moving it ever. It's all surrounding you. All these different things, no space, no time, and we are in the middle of it. It is, what is psychicness? When people get psychic, it means they are holographically accessing the timeline just above this one, which some people call the astral. And they're getting intuitions and feelings about it. It's like if you're with a person and you're exchanging energy with that person, in the law of one, you are them at the higher levels, not in this level. You can't make pretend that you're everybody. You are, in truth, at the higher dimensions. Everything keeps coming together. But in this dimension, it's hard to hold that. But we do, our group holds it on our and I've observed so many people who send me emails saying I started smiling more. I started being happy. People are liking me better. I'm having synchronicities. You know, and all I'm doing is showing up, and they are showing up. And yes, we bring their information in. Yes, we ask them questions. But more than anything, they bring their frequencies in, and suddenly we feel time shifting. And we shift above the patterns that are holding us in, that are keeping us contracted. And then we can have miracles. We can have changes in manifestations that, let's see what time, oh my God, we started here. We're only an hour and a half into this. All right. Alfred, let me give you an opportunity to ask any questions. Thanks for being patient and letting me ramble.
No, yeah. Well, thank you. This has been quite a, I would say a sharing, and I really appreciate it. Well, my first question is this, and I just want to give a little bit of a context to it. I'm looking on my other screen at the interview that you and I did called David Wilcock and I documented David as Edgar Cayce's reincarnation, and it goes on to list 8 points linking Edgar Cayce and David Wilcock. And we won't go into all the cosmology here, but just that. I thought that the book that you wrote was excellent and a very, very good book. And, you know, and I'll be sharing this article in the News Inside Out article that accompanies this webinar. Now I'm building up to my question. And my question is a very simple one. So when can we expect the book on the Elohim?
Believe me, I've started it. You know, I have started this book 10 times. And I have a book that I give away for free. It's not my current book, and it's not published. But if people go to my website, intelligent-infinity.com, I put a book out called The Creator Gods of the Physical Universe Want to Talk to You. And some of the excerpts I was reading were from that book. You know, that was early on in 2004 or 5, I think, that I was putting all that together. And I was still putting it together. I mean, I wrote the book, and a lot of people have read the book, but I didn't know how to promote the book, and nobody was coming forward to help me. So, but now, in this period of time, I'm much more confident. I'm much more, I know that they are who they say they are. And I know there is truly the potential here to shift the entire planet if enough people could hold these higher frequencies. It would rip the power from the negative. They couldn't do anything. And, you know, some of you who are listening, who have been on our calls, you know, this is, you know how the phone broke down earlier, Terry's phone? I mean, this attracts blocking energies. It's the best way to describe it. And, you know, 7 months ago, Terry came down with stage 4 lymphoma. And I was sure, I wasn't sure, but I thought she was going to die. She was so bad. She was spaced out. She was getting transfusions every month. And And we started, I had been doing this business. Well, this is a whole nother thing. I'm taking too long an answer here, Alfred. Definitely, there's a book out. If you go to intelligent-infinity.com, and Alfred's supposed to have a link to it. You can sign up and get that book for free. And it is kind of mind-blowing because I reiterate some of the story I told, and I have a lot of Elohim channelings in it, you know. But I started to say, this is a whole little sidetrack here, but I'll take it because it fits. About 7 months ago, Terry was like getting lightheaded. She was having low energy. She was, it was happening for a month. And eventually we went to hospital, emergency. And they said she was anemic. And they gave her 4 units of blood, which was a lot of blood. And 2 weeks later, they called and said she had stage 4 lymphoma. And so, of course, they sent us to an oncologist, and she had 1 session of chemotherapy. And she and I both have studied a lot of alternative medicine stuff and did not want to do chemotherapy if there was another way. So everything else I was doing, ways that I was earning money. And for the next months, we were trying everything alternative. And she still needed blood every 3 to 4 weeks at the hospital. The cancer was in her in her bone marrow. So then I think it was the end of May, I got a notice from somebody in LA, keep in mind we live in Sedona, that this woman who was a healer was coming to Sedona. And normally that wouldn't excite me. I mean, normally there's so many people that do healings in Sedona, and I wouldn't know how to pick one that I could depend on, if it would work. And we had already spent a fortune. And we raised a bunch of money in GoFundMe in our group. And otherwise we'd be on the street right now. So I asked my sources, and I said, would it be good for Terry to see Kimberly? And they said it would be good. So I immediately booked a session, and we went to see her live. And I introduced Kimberly to Alfred, and she'll probably come on and do an event with Alfred sometime soon. She is amazing. She goes in front of her room, and she's kind of like like an evangelist. I am love, I am light. We're bringing love and light into the room. She had 12 people in the room in Sedona, and she went around the room and she picked the worst person in the room to do a demonstration of her healing abilities. And of course, that was Terry. And Terry went up on the table, and Kimberly put her hands on Terry. Now, Kimberly is saying she's got a bunch of angels working through her. She's not doing it. She just gets out of the way, and they're sending energy through her. And people feel movement in their bodies. And so Terry got off the table after about 20 minutes, and she said she was feeling better. She was looking better. So then we had another session with Kimberly, a private session. And Kimberly did her, you know, her rituals, her I am love, I am light, and and then, you know, they communicate with her through her eyes blinking. That when the right eye blinks, it means no, and when the left eye blinks, it means yes. And they're directing her to people's bodies, saying, heart, no, yes. So, you know, they're moving all around, and she is just diagnosing people. And I learned that people were having tumors disappear right in the first session with her. They walked in with a tumor, and they walked out without it. It was amazing. And so now I'm in the private session with Kimberly, with Terry. And she gives me an opportunity to ask some questions. Like, I asked, so are any of you from the Elohim group? And she blinked yes. And then I said, are any of you from the Ra group? She blinked another yes. And then she looked at me and she said, I know the Elohim are God, but who are the Ra group? And that began a friendship, okay? So now Kimberly leaves Sedona and she goes back to LA. Terry gets a blood test. For the first time in 4 months, her blood went up, didn't go down. She has not needed blood since Kimberly worked on her. We are still doing all kinds of alternative things to keep her in the body, and she's doing better and better and better. But it kind of blew my mind how effective she was. I've had her on my own show a number of times, and it's hard to get her to be human. She just kind of jumps into her human side, is kind of fragile and vulnerable, and she just kind of like jumps and says, we are here and we're bringing in love light. And I normally would resist that. I normally would think it was too much evangelical, but I could feel the energy in what she was doing. And you know, if you get my book, the free one, you'll get all kinds of things. I'll probably have Kimberly on my show again. She'll be on Alfred's show again. You'll get a chance. We're pretty low on money because we've been doing all of this work with Terry, and I started a business. I better tell you this. This is a funny story. 5 years ago, Terry and I are living in Sedona, and you know, we're giving away a lot of stuff for free. I haven't not known how to make this work as a business and not make it lose its innocence, because it is innocent. And I started saying, if I don't do something to make money, we're going to be homeless. So I had read about these energy products that they were making and that were being sold in certain multi-levels for a lot of money. And I started scanning the internet, and I found that there were some companies in Asia that seemed to be making the same ones. And I got some samples, and I put them in the local health food store to see if they would sell. Kept it really cheap. We were buying them cheap. When we got the samples, everybody tried them and said, geez, I noticed something. This feels good. What they do is they put these little pendants. Do you have a pendant on? Let's see. Here we go. Ta-da! We put these pendants in a chamber where there's frequencies, and it causes the pendants to absorb the frequencies And when you bring them near your body, it enhances the biofield of your body. We have numerous photos of, you know, those aura cameras. When somebody puts a pendant on, their colors shift for the better, and they have more energy. And so we started out with a local health food store, and I didn't really think they would sell. And I came back a week later. I think I left them a dozen. They were sold out. In 2 months, they sold 80. And the guy who was there at the desk was saying, like, I don't know how this works. People are coming in, they're doing muscle testing, they're doing pendulums, and the pendants are just flying out the door. So from there, we kept getting more and more stores, getting more and more results like that. Some stores said, guy came in with a pendulum, and he said, our pendants were the strongest thing in the store. So this is my pitch. If you like the work we're doing and you want to support it, go to wellnesspendant.net. And I don't know if Alfred put that link up, and order some pendants. If you use the discount code EXOPOLITICS, they're $25 each, okay? I used to feel really guilty about pitching stuff like that. But I was Benjamin. It made me a really good salesman. So, but I believe in these. We go to our website, you'll blow your mind. We have chiropractors, all kinds of people. And we started running out of money, even though they were doing this business. Terry does half of it, and her side was going down because she couldn't maintain her energy. So we did a fundraiser on GoFundMe. And she, you know, she's still doing a lot of therapy. She's doing vitamin C IV drips. She's taking all kinds of supplements. And she's, as you can tell, her energy is really beautiful today. And it's really amazing to have known her for 30 years. And for so many years, I thought she was a ditz. Now I know she was a saint. In fact, a funny story about Terry is that she remembers a lot of her track. And she remembers before she came into this realm. Okay, I'm sure you all have heard of the tunnel of light, right? Well, the way the tunnel of light works, and there's, by the way, there's a tunnel of dark too. You got to be careful because the negative tries to trick people into going the wrong way. But the tunnel of light is where somebody that has their heart open, slightly more than half, they'll have the opportunity to go up that tunnel, and Terry calls it the heaven realms. It's like a rehabilitation place where people work with you, angelic beings work with you to help you get over the trauma of being in 3D. And Terry, before she came into 3D, was working as one of the angelic beings in that realm. And she remembers, I don't remember this, I'll just tell the story. She remembers that she and I were friends, and I jumped into this realm and disappeared. And after a while, she said, I wonder why people are getting so screwed up down there. And she jumped in and said, I want to go look for him. And so I don't know if we met in other lifetimes, but that might have been millions of years ago. But when we met this lifetime, she just couldn't take her attention off of me. She was giving a talk in a multi-level marketing company, and I was at the talk, and she kept staring at me. And I said, this is going to be trouble. And it was. So, in any case, and then 30 years later, here she is being a conduit to the Elohim. And we are so honored that they have chosen to work with us. And so many people are having so many great experiences as a result of connecting with our work. But let me just finish on this pendant. I just want to make sure I say this. If you go to the website, you want to buy one, by the way, we sold out. We're getting some more in about 3 or 4 days. What are you doing?
I'm showing the back.
Oh, the back.
Yeah,
The
show
back.
the front.
Okay. You put exopolitics in, and you'll get it for
Show the front.
$25. And we have 2 of them. One of them is called Flow. It's got a different design. You'll see it on the website. But here's one of the cool things. And I can only say this because I've talked so much about the Elohim and how they work, how they have the ability to flow energy into this realm. Let me just show you something. This was something that was in 2004 or 5. I gave a talk. 2004, I gave the first talk on the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And while I was talking, I could see this energy dancing around people's heads. And it was really bright. And when my talk was over, everyone was very excited. And they were leaving the room, and Terry was outside selling books. They were lining up to buy books from her and saying, I could see auras. I never saw auras before. And Terry said, what are you doing in there? And I said, I was just talking. It's just like I'm talking now. And then I wasn't talking about my Elohim experience. I was just talking about the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And people said they were seeing auras. So later, I asked them, I said, could you explain the energy that was in the room? And they said, that was us. We were helping you. And that blew my mind. I mean, up to that point, they were giving me the most phenomenal information. I'm reading you some of the channelings. Now I show up in a room and they're helping me. I know there's people that are listening right now that are feeling energy, and that it's not me. They use me to help uplift, find people that are reaching. You have to reach. You have to test it and reach. And you'll feel it. Then another time, I was giving a talk at this doctor's house in West Hollywood. And here's a picture of the doctor and his friend, okay? His name was James Julian, okay? And I then was sitting in that same chair. A few minutes later, where are you? I'm losing it. I'm so glad I printed these things up this morning. You have to be patient. I'm sitting in the same chair, and the picture of me sitting in that chair, I am surrounded with pink light. And I asked them, I said, could you explain that pink light? And they said, that was us. Here it is. I don't know if you can see the pink. You can hardly see, I'm not clear. You can't see me. And then one time we were driving through Philadelphia. I was driving through with girlfriend 1, and we had done at that time we were driving to locations and planting light columns and bringing in energy. And they asked us to go to Philadelphia and do this. And at the time, I didn't know about I was brought up in Philadelphia. And just for the record, I used to work in downtown Philadelphia. I used to walk to Independence Hall from this electronics store that I worked at once a week. The Franklin Institute was my favorite place. And I distinctly remember looking at the statue of Benjamin Franklin and saying to myself, I knew what it felt like to be that guy. And here we are in downtown Philadelphia, and I don't see the colors showing up.
Show up a little.
See the pink? Pink is the Elohim's color. We were like...
We can see that.
You can see it? Okay.
Oh yeah, very,
Yeah.
very, very, very definitely. Wynn,
Go ahead, Alfred.
yeah. I'm just going to step away from the camera a moment. I'll be right back, but you just continue, okay?
I'm going to miss you. You know what? We're doing group energy. I can feel your energy. You are holding, you know, Alfred holds the space so other people can do something. And he is very supportive of the energy. And when he is listening, he helps me stay on track. I don't know if he gives himself credit for that, but let me show you some other pictures. Okay. This is one where I had to take a promotional picture for something. And the woman wanted me to take a picture without my glasses. Now, for some reason, when I printed this, it got squished together. But Terry took the picture, and that was the picture, okay? And I said, I don't like that picture. I look like a nerd. And I said, let's take another picture. And then we have this invocation to bring the light in, to bring the Elohim in. And so I said, let's do that invocation and see what happens. And we did. I looked quickly at the picture and I said, nope, I still don't like it. And then when I got home, I looked at the picture again. And you notice, I don't know if the color's coming out, but there's pink all over my chest. And of course, that was the first time I've noticed pink with them. And I went back and we did a channeling and I said, could you explain that? And they said, pink is our color. That was us. You called on us. And then I know you all have seen orbs or seen pictures of them. At one point, I was doing a lecture somewhere, and there was this blue orb on my elbow. So we went home and we did a channeling, and I said, could you explain the blue orb that was on my elbow? And they said, it was a member of the Ra group who was there helping me. See, the Elohim come in huge, as you can see, like huge pink. Like they're all over all of you. If you can feel them, they're over me. You know, when we do a whole planet healing, people that are on the call feel this energy wherever they are. Let me just say, wholeplanethealing.com, wholeplanethealing.com. We'll be on there tonight. Show up. It's got the phone number there, 7 o'clock. They're really fun. Here's another little thing. You know, occasionally Terry and I are doing shows up. We don't look for them. Deceased and famous, people with big auras. And it's a whole nother 2-hour show to tell you about that. But I thought I'd share Robin Williams. Let me just say, the guy said he was Robin Williams. I never believed it until I kicked the tires for a while. But a voice came through, Terry, that said it was Robin Williams. And I started querying him. And I'm trying to see if it's really him. So what was your address, Robin? And what's your manager's name? And he kept saying, I can't remember. And then he said, you know how when people have Alzheimer's, their brain's broken and they can't remember? Imagine what it's like not to have a brain. And I said, bingo, that's Robin. He told more jokes from the other side. And it was very funny. And at one point he said, you know, I had headaches my entire life because I died in a plane crash my previous lifetime. And so I said, who are you? And he said, Will Rogers. Ta-da! Did you get that, Alfred?
Yes, I saw that. I'm reserving judgment. I'm not.
Yeah, I would reserve judgment too. I reserve judgment about everything I do. Okay, it's only taken me 12 years to be this willing to be this transparent. You know, and I tell people.
Well, I have a question. Whenever you're ready to take.
I tell people, don't believe anything I say. You know, just check me out. Check my materials out. Come to my conference calls. And if it doesn't make a contribution to your life, go somewhere else, okay? I mean, give you an example of one of the extraordinary things that happened. This was about 5 years ago. We were doing a Sunday healing call. And we'd put things in the light. That's the terminology. Putting it in the light is to putting it into the zone where the Elohim or some other high source might help mitigate a negative circumstances. I mean, and there was Hurricane Gustav was barreling down on New Orleans, and it was supposed to hit with the same strength as Hurricane Katrina did a short time before, a year before or something. So we put Hurricane Katrina in the light, Hurricane Gustav in the light. And I'll put it on Terry because something happened that Sunday that never ever happened. Terry started to have a conversation, or the Elohim started to have a conversation with Hurricane Gustav, and Terry was kind of like reporting everything, okay? And maybe I'll let Terry tell the story, okay? Here we go.
The Elohim have a way of getting bigger or smaller, and they can go up in the sky, they can go off planet, they can get bigger than a galaxy. Well, I kind of am invisible, and I ride kind of with them in their energy bubble. And we were looking at the hurricane, and the hurricane looked like a little top spinning below, and it had a consciousness. And the Elohim started speaking with the hurricane, and the hurricane started speaking with the Elohim, and they were saying, wow, did you see all those houses that we took apart? Wasn't that something? And the Elohim would say, yes, you have an awful lot of amazing energy. And then the Elohim directed their attention to the shore. And they said, take a look at the shore. No, it was daylight. The Elohim said, do you see all those little points of light along the shore? And the hurricane said, we do. And the Elohim said, these are people that are praying that the hurricane that you won't strike full strength. And do you think there's any possibility that you could donate some of your great energy to areas of Earth that are lacking energy? And the hurricane said, we'd be glad to do that. And so the Elohim started directing energy to a place in an army camp where the ground had been beaten down, to an area of the San Andreas that lacked energy, to the vortexes in Sedona, and that gust won't be a problem now. And Wynn had, he didn't believe it. I'll put him on to explain.
Yeah, I was thinking, all the news was saying Gustav was going to hit at full force. And Terry just had this session and they said, no problem. And I said, there goes my credibility. So after the call, this call ended at noon on Sunday, Pacific time. And after the call was over, I immediately went on the internet and started scanning the internet. And I was finding all these reports. Hurricane Gustav mysteriously dropped from a level 4 to a level 3. And then by the time it hit New Orleans, it was like a level 2 or 1. And I said, geez, did we do that? And we did a channeling. And I said, you mean if we did not do that, it would have hit full force? And they said, yes. And then I said, can you guys stop a nuclear bomb from going off? And they said, we could if enough people ask. And that's why we're doing whole planet healing. And you know, I don't like responsibility. I don't need to show up every day at 7 o'clock, make a commitment. But they hit me over the head. I believe this is real. I believe we have a miracle-making, the basis, the template for a miracle-making machine. And it's one of the reasons I decided to come on and share this with Alfred. Alfred, I'm going to shut up. I missed you when you were gone, you know.
Well, I want you to tell people what the phone number is so that they can call in, because I've been calling in and I've been
Okay, let me give the number.
I've been listening to your calls, and because you were very eloquent that the Elohim can stop any nuclear war from happening if we ask for it. And I said, hey, I don't want a nuclear war on the planet. So tell us what time and what number.
They're going to be so happy if a lot of people show up tonight. You know, they have such a hard time. Like, they tell me that what I'm doing is very rare in this realm. It's very rare to get somebody talking to the Elohim who has the talents I have. you know, that has the writing ability, the communicative ability. There's other people that they talk to, but most people just get in total awe of them. And I'm able to be transparent. Here is the number. Whole planet healing. It's going to happen in 3 hours. 712-770-4340. 712-770-4340. And the PIN is 250513. 250513.
And then, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And it's also wholeplanethhealing.com. Wholeplanethhealing.com. Just type that into your computer and you'll get the number again. Okay.
Right. And you hit a pound after that.
You don't have to. It'll still connect. It just bypasses it, you know.
Okay. I'm also going to put it on the Facebook page that we're on live so that people will have that. And we're also going to put it in the article that will accompany this that will also be up there. And then I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
We'll kindly take it. And just to give a bit of a background. And okay, so here it goes. And I want to give some context to it. Well, as I've shared with you, I was the keynote speaker, in fact, at the 100th anniversary celebration of the birth of Edgar Cayce that was held in St. John the Divine Cathedral in New York. And, you know, and that kind of surprised me. And that's because I published a book co-written with another person. And that was based in part on the Edgar Cayce readings and that integrated the earth sciences with psychic predictions of earth changes. Now, the earth changes didn't happen and have not happened. So that could have been through the shift in the timeline and through the intervention of many different other factors. Could be through what I call higher intelligence, which includes the Elohim that could have done that. So that's Edgar Cayce again through the keynote speaker. And you wrote a book on David Wilcock as the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. So that's two Edgar Cayce things.
Do you know there was
I haven't gotten to the question yet, but go ahead with your interruption. Go ahead.
Well, you got to a question. It is a rather important thing.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry.
Well, let me just, it wasn't the question you addressed, but you'll be glad of my answer. Okay. In the Wilcock book, now keep in mind, there's a premise that who was talking through Edgar Cayce and who was talking through Wilcock is this group soul that calls himself the Ra group. They were not the Ra of Jesus. I mean, not Jesus, of Egypt. They were not the god Ra, Amun-Ra. That was a negative source. And in the Wilcock book, Wilcock's source addressed the Cayce prophecy, the devastation prophecy, in great detail. And they said that was not from them, meaning not from the Ra group. That was from a source that was trying to intervene through the Cayce readings and create fear in the future. And when I was writing the Wilcock book, I had the Cayce CD-ROM. And if you go look up that reading, you will find it had a byline. I don't want to invoke them, but it was not, it had a name, it was signed. And then I looked up every time that being showed up, and it was saying things like, I am in the heavens like Jesus is, Christ is to your planet. And eventually there was something called a Search for God group when Cayce was doing his readings that was monitoring Cayce, and they were making recommendations. The Search for God group recommended not to let that being in anymore, and they didn't. But yet, that is Cayce's most famous prophecy. You know, basically the prophecy went something like, Tokyo is going to go down in the blink of an eye, Europe's going down in the blink of an eye, California is falling in the water, look for Mount Vesuvius to erupt, and it was not Cayce's source. And then Wilcock, through Wilcock, they said, we tried to rectify that. And actually, when I studied Cayce, I remembered finding the rectification. And it left a big question mark in my mind, because they said these changes will happen gradually. And no one ever quotes that. Everyone quotes everything is going down in the blink of an eye. So, you know, the Wilcock book is very relevant, just because Wilcock isn't channeling anymore. It has, the Ra group has been very important in our realm. And they've done different things than the Elohim group. I have come to the conclusion that Jesus was very much a product of the Ra group. I asked the question about that to my sources, and they said that was true. And I did a lot of cross-referencing, and I found enough evidence for me to know that was true. So the Ra group was very important. And in our case, we have, because I have a connection with both group souls, we now are getting the source that talks to us. This started about 5 years ago, came through Terry and said, Terry was saying, they have a surprise for us tonight, but I don't know what it is. And apparently the Ra group and the Elohim group, because I'm more of a Ra person, Terry is more of an Elohim person probably, but the two of them had come together and said, let's work together through Wynn and Terry. And so the source that comes through identifies itself as a conglomerate of the Ra group and the Elohim group. And the thing about the Ra group, the thing of their main contribution that's different than the Elohim group is very powerful. You saw that picture of Philadelphia where the whole sky turned pink, and where they do amazing things. The Ra group has gotten stuck in this realm, whereas the Elohim group didn't get stuck in this realm. They never came into it. Well, some did, and the ones that came in got stuck. That's a whole nother story. But the Ra group, as a group, everyone was stuck in this realm, and they managed to graduate. So they have incredible wisdom on how to untrap yourself from this realm. And the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce is full of that wisdom. So don't dismiss that book because you don't like Wilcock now, or even if you do like him, he doesn't really endorse it very much. The book stands on its own, and the channeling stand on their own. And that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that that source that made that prophecy was not Cayce's trusted source. And another comment on that, when we ask the Elohim to make prophecies or say, what's this going to happen? They say they won't do it. And they won't do it because if their energy is brought in, it's a whole new ball game. It's a new creation. And it's rare for their energy to come in like this. But just the fact that I'm here now talking about it, and And we're going to have a whole bunch of people on whole planet healing, and a whole bunch of people, I think this will be true, will be studying their sessions and their work. That changes the dispensation of this realm, because now, instead of passively waiting for the inevitable future to unfold, we are creating, we're bringing in the energy to change the future. Okay? The future is being created moment by moment by moment. And the more people that are passively saying, the New World Order, the more that's going to happen. It's consciousness. They say that over and over again. So they will not make a prophecy because they don't want to lock our minds in. Go ahead, Alfred. I'll shut up.
No, I think that this is a very important dialogue, because what happened to me was that I read the Edgar Cayce Earth Changes Prophecies together with Dr. Philip Liss, who then was a professor of experimental psychology at Rutgers University in New York. And I met him in January of 1973 in New York City, when I was general counsel in the Environmental Protection Administration of New York. And he was an experimental psychologist, and he also had an interest in extraterrestrial and parapsychological issues. So he had been studying the Edgar Cayce prophecies, among others, and he showed that to me, and I was an environmental policy wonk, if you want to call it that, but had not really understood, had not gotten into ETs, and at that point, then in February 1973, I had my ET abduction, which I presented this year down in Washington State, which was an interlinked abduction with Jimmy Carter, the same series of ETs with Jimmy Carter and U.S. chrononaut Andy Bashago, who witnessed my ET abduction. So I've got a witness who's a lawyer, who's a former U.S. chrononaut, who witnessed me on a spaceship. And it was linked to Jimmy Carter, because that's how it was planned on the spaceship that I would become, at Stanford Research Institute, the director of the Carter White House 1977 extraterrestrial communication study, which was to open up the planet to these positive energies and move away from the negative energies. At any rate, when Dr. Liss showed me these prophecies, I said, oh my God, because I was very naive at that point. I hadn't been introduced to all these distinctions, and I thought it was correct. So together with him, I actually wrote a book, a policy book that was translated into a number of languages and was published in Japan, that took the Cayce prophecies literally, and that provided a solution in case they did happen, how mankind would survive. And then a number of years later, I wrote a book saying, look, the only way to understand these is that Edgar Cayce had a remote viewing or something, but geologic time is in a different time span, and they don't happen all at once. They happen over a long period of time. So I got caught up in whoever that trickster being was part of my introduction to this multi-dimensional world. But so all of a sudden, this book was published in 1973 to 74, and it was on all the airport bookstores, and it gave rise to the whole generation of books that we are the earthquake generation, you know, all of this. All of that was born from my book because I advertised this trickster. So I feel that karmically, my doing these interviews with you is kind of my karmic, you know, dues that I'm paying.
Making up for it.
Making up for it.
You got other
and
things. You got some other things to make up for too.
yeah. And then in February of 1973, I was sitting there in my loft. Teresa, God bless her soul, she passed over. She was a Peruvian architect who was my wife and the mother of my son, Freddie, who's now an actor. I mean, he's a tremendous guy who lives in Berkeley, and is he's an Oxford trained actor and really good guy, and also is has just made some major discoveries that the I Ching is in the Tao. I mean, that's apparently blowing a lot of stuff in that particular world, in that, you know, those understandings. I had this multidimensional experience in which this being came down and said, and it's described in this book that I published in January this year called My Journey Landing Heaven on Earth. That's in ebook form. You can get it online at exopolitics.com or on Amazon. And so in February of 1973, right after I meet Dr. Liss, who shows me the Cayce readings, I have this interdimensional experience, and this being comes down and says, you know, we start communicating telepathically. And I ask telepathically, well, who are you? And it says, I am the Holy Spirit. And all of a sudden I say, well, who am I? He says, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will found my church, which is like intimating that I'm, you know, that's a line from the New Testament, right?
Right.
That Jesus says to Peter, his right-hand man. And of course, I don't tell anybody, like, for, you know, until I publish this book, basically. But I mean, and I tie that in with, that's typically what interdimensional ETs tell contactees when you study exopolitics, which I've done. And so I tie that in with the interdimensional ET abduction experience, quote, end of quote. And I went through all this time, well, you know, was this my lab? Was it really me? Da, 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 da. And it's all kind of, all the facts of it are set out in this book. So it's a very similar journey that you had, but you had it with the Elohim, and I had it with some weird interdimensional thing. But they're related because we've got Edgar Cayce in there. We've got, you know, thing. So I'd like to ask Terry, if you would ask her for me, because you've got the earphones. Mm-hmm. If there's any Elohim related thing to my story, if you could ask her.
You know what? I don't want to put her into a channeling mode right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, we can do it some.
I will ask that question privately. It's better.
Yeah.
Because, you notice it's getting dark out here.
Yeah. Look, we've actually gone. This is a very long webinar because we've gone almost a half hour beyond the normal 2 hours. So, yeah. So we might as well on this, you know, as we're getting here, and people may be wanting to get ready to join you for your 7 p.m. Pacific time call. Let me give out the number again. Hold on a second. I've got it right here. Got to get the page. Where is it? Yeah. Oops. I guess I don't have it.
Here we go. I got it.
Yeah. Okay.
712-770-4340. 712-770-4340 and 250-513. And I want to tell you, this is the first time I've ever been public talking about being Benjamin Franklin. I never wanted to talk about that. This is the first time I've gone public and talked about whole planet healing, because I was afraid we would lose our ambience. You know, this is the real deal. And Alfred has created such a beautiful space where I could be totally authentic. And I really thank you so much for that. And we've had a group of like maybe 50 or 60 people that have been coming around for a year holding the energy for this. And I was afraid that I get a bunch of new people and then I wouldn't want to do it anymore. They'd be hassling me and whatever. So this is like a breakthrough call for me, making that public, whole planet healing. And well, past lives don't matter. It's just that it helped me understand more about why they chose me to do this, because I was able to handle the expanded understanding of things on my conscious mind. But in any case, I thank you so much, Alfred, for giving me the opportunity to come on. And let me, you know, we can do this again. We got so many things we can do.
Oh, yeah.
We can bring in the Elohim. I can tell about Jesus. I have more stuff about Jesus than you'd believe, you know. Talk about how to stay out of some of the dark stuff. But in any case, here's Terry.
This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We'll have to do it again.
Well, thank you, Terry.
You're welcome.
Definitely. So Wynn says that he's going to ask you privately about some things that I shared from my story as to whether they have a connection to the Elohim. And so he's going to ask you. And so maybe, you know, in the future, you can talk about it. Okay.
All right, we'll do the private. That'll be good, because I need to really have the private connection with the Elohim to have them come through. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds very good. So we're just about finished.
Darker and darker.
We're just about finished now. So thank you very much, and we'll be with you in just about 2.5 hours for the phone call tonight.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful.
Okay,
great.
Then. Yeah.
Love to everybody.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Okay. So, are there any things, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our viewers? Because I think that we will be with you within 2.5 hours on the call, and that way I can get this up on the internet by the time the call is up.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, all I'd like to say is that, you know, when you do want to, well, I got bored doing certain shows because, you know, and I am so glad Alfred held the energy, because this is kind of a breakthrough call, Alfred, and that he held the energy, that the space, that we could do all this publicly. And I'm so grateful for Alfred. He really works hard at making a difference, and he does make a difference. And just to rattle off my website, intelligent-infinity.com. That's where you can download my free book. manwhowalked.com. We didn't talk about that. We did talk about that before, is how I came across the reincarnation of Matthew. Wellnesspendant.net, wellnesspendant.net, where you can get those pendants, and maybe Alfred will probably put them up and help support our work. And get on my list, and then I'll send you other things. Our conference calls, you know, we do 10 conference calls a week, and people don't get bored. It's like, I guess some people do, but we got a loyal group of people that are holding the energy, and I just thank them so much, because they have given me the wherewithal to keep hanging in, because this is not the easiest stuff to get out into the world. And it's been so amazing to watch people grow and change who keep paying attention to our work. I thank everyone who has hung in here, and you can see I'm getting darker and darker. God, I look menacing now. In any case, thank you all for being here, and we'll keep paying attention. We'll be out there soon.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Nice.